Before the war, German football sounded different. It smelled of rain-soaked leather and coal smoke drifting in from nearby factories. Wooden stands creaked under the weight of quiet anticipation. A referee's whistle cut through the air. One breath. One kickoff. Sunday had arrived. But even then, something was wrong. The 1910s began as a decade of promise for German football. Clubs were growing. Crowds were forming habits. Tactics were being learned. The game was finding its identity. And yet, hovering over every match, was a shadow the crowd refused to name. What happens when the world's most human game collides with industrial war? This is the story of the decade when German football stopped counting only goals and started counting losses. When tactics met trenches. When clubs grew up overnight. And when a nation learned that a ball cannot roll louder than history. A game still learning to walk. In the years before World War I, German football was still discovering itself. In the south, clubs like Karlsruher FV, SpVgg Fürth, and VfB Leipzig played with elegance and control. In the north, Victoria Berlin and Holstein Kiel answered with discipline. In the west, workers' clubs emerged straight from factory life, shaped by shift whistles and shared exhaustion. The dominant system was the pyramid: 2 defenders, 3 halfbacks, 5 attackers. It was aggressive, open, and exhausting. The ball skimmed low across uneven grass, then soared forward in hopeful arcs. Goalkeepers wore thick wool sweaters. Forwards played in heavy boots that bit into the soil. British influence was everywhere. Short passing. Combination play. The idea that football could be organized rather than improvised. German football wasn't copying England. It was translating it. 1912, a glimpse of what could be. Then came Stockholm. At the 1912 Olympic Games, Germany sent a young national team. No trophies. No expectations. Just curiosity. The results were brutal at first. A painful loss to Austria exposed every weakness. But something changed. In the consolation matches, goals poured in. 16 against Russia. 10 scored by one man, Gottfried Fuchs. Fuchs was not just prolific. He was intuitive. He finished before defenders reacted, as if he already knew where the ball would land. Alongside him played Julius Hirsch. Fast. Direct. Relentless. Together, they represented a future German football had barely dared to imagine. For the first time, Germany saw proof that technique and imagination could coexist with discipline. Football becomes a culture. Back home, domestic football grew louder and more organized. Trains carried away teams at dawn. Bakers whispered lineups while dusted in flour. In towns without matches, boys counted defenders aloud on dusty fields, arguing about offside rules they barely understood. The German Football Association tightened control. Rules became standardized. Referees gained authority. Regional federations coordinated schedules. The South dominated tactically. Fürth played with rhythm and intelligence. Karlsruher FV burned through midfields. An English coach, William Townley, introduced structured training and spatial awareness. In Franconia, a young club learned a crucial lesson: matches could be won with the mind when legs failed. Football was no longer a pastime. It was becoming a system. 1914, the last normal season. The 1914 season pulsed with tension. SpVgg Fürth reached the final. Every cross felt decisive. Every clearance mattered. When the final whistle blew, Fürth lifted the Victoria Trophy for the first time. A summit earned through patience and control. And then, weeks later, the world fractured. Mobilization orders replaced match schedules. Trains stopped carrying teams and started carrying soldiers. Stadium noise faded into recruitment speeches and collection drives. The ball still rolled. But not the same way. Football under fire. War stripped football of innocence and gave it weight. Team photos developed empty spaces. Players posed in uniform. Matches were labeled patriotic. Gate receipts funded war bonds. Halftime collections supported the wounded. National competitions collapsed. Travel restrictions fractured leagues into regional islands. Ration cards replaced matchday programs. Sundays felt hollow when villages first whispered names of the dead. Yet matches continued. And teenagers became captains overnight because the older men were gone. A harder game. The tactics didn't disappear. They hardened. The pyramid remained, but challenges sharpened. Fields deteriorated. Winters dragged on. Halfbacks organized courage as much as possession. Goalkeepers became commanders. Inside forwards became distributors rather than artists. Coaches emphasized control. Make the opponent run. Create order where chaos threatened. Football became an exercise in dignity. Not beauty. Survival. Who watched changed too. The stands looked different. Women filled rows once occupied by men. Children pressed closer to railings. Singing softened. Faces aged. Sports pages shrank to short columns. Not celebration, but consolation. And still, between the lines, something stubborn persisted. Football endured. The game at the front. On military training grounds, matches were played between barracks. 2 units. 1 field. 90 minutes of borrowed normality. Boots kicked frozen ground. Caps were pulled low. Jackets flapped open on sprints. The pass became agreement. The goal became proof that life still exceeded orders. Field newspapers reported tiny victories, medics versus engineers, regiments against regiments. For many, it was the only breath they had. A silent national team. International football vanished. A grand tournament planned for Berlin in 1916 dissolved into paperwork. Federation officials counted costs, curfews, and casualties. When meetings ended, they stayed seated in silence, listening to their own breathing. The national team existed only in memory. Names written differently. Players' return changed. Or not at all. Gottfried Fuchs. Julius Hirsch. Others too. Some carried scars. Some carried silence. Some never came home. Clubs learned not to speak certain names at halftime. Football became a place of return. Training sessions felt ceremonial. Matches felt like temporary normality. Foundations of the future. In the South, structure replaced improvisation. Firth trained relentlessly. Support runs. Set plays. Rotations. Nuremberg grew into a rival defined by patience. Federations coordinated schedules under scarcity. The West leaned on grit. Workers carried equipment themselves. Coaches taught with looks instead of whistles. Leaders spoke by kerosene light. In Berlin, football remained sharp, argumentative, and proud. Even missing voices couldn't silence its tone. What the war taught the game. By 1918, Germany was exhausted. Clubs were broke. Players injured or gone. Trophies gathered dust. And yet, clubhouses filled again. Not with commands. With conversation. Football became a school of civility. It taught patience. Trust. Structure. Tactical humility. German football didn't emerge stronger. It emerged wiser. When Sunday returned. Eventually, Sunday came back. Wet leather. Coal smoke. Scarred players with steady hands. The whistle lifted. The murmur rose. The ball rolled. Not like before. But with understanding. Legacy of the 1910s. The war did not destroy German football. It reshaped it. It turned artists into workers. Talents into leaders. Clubs into institutions. It taught the sport how to endure pressure without losing itself. And it showed what football could be when the world tightened around it, a shared breath. If this decade stayed with you, subscribe. This channel exists to keep these stories alive. Because football does not survive on trophies alone. It survives on memory.